All right, we'll call to order the City Council special meeting agenda for Monday, April the 22nd, 2024 at 4:00 p.m. Roll call and certification of quorum. Madam Secretary, I'll certify we have a quorum present as all members are present with the exception of member Hernandez, who did text me. He's on his way, got hung up something in traffic, and so he'll be here shortly. We can time him in when he gets here. Moving forward to citizens' comments, did we receive any citizens' comments? There are none, so with that, we'll move to new business. Council input and discussion regarding fiscal year 2025 budget and council priorities. So with that, Trent, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Council.
Yes. Yeah, real quick, just want to let you know if you've looked at this, we'll save questions till we get to the question part. I think it's broken up in thirds.
I think we got it broken up in the general fund and then
enterprise
fund. So.
Yeah, and so save your questions till we get to that, and we'll do the round robin at that point.
Sure. Thank you for that, Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. Good point there is that we do have a lot of information, but we'd like to be able to get through that, and then we can have a full, robust discussion and answer any questions. I first want to kick off by saying thank you to our budget staff, who's led by Rachel Winslow. They're also in the midst of putting this together, in the throes of preparing the FY25 budget. Also want to thank the departments for getting all their budgets in on time. Those have been submitted. They're being reviewed by the budget office, and we're in the middle of having those individual department meetings to understand, what the budget requests are and what the needs are. So just a couple things on what tonight is and what tonight is not. So tonight's discussion is an opportunity to provide the council an update on our current FY24 budget, plus an early look at FY25, discuss some of the drivers that will inform our upcoming FY25 budget decisions. Additionally, it's an opportunity for council input on any items that should be considered in the upcoming budget that's not already in the works or on top of our minds. And then just, a reiteration of we use the strategic priorities and milestones plus our master planning efforts to evaluate and consider items for inclusion in the budget as we go through that process. And use those strategic priorities as a framework for discussing the budget. For what tonight is not, is we're not looking at or setting any tax rates or setting any water or sewer rates, as we're just too early in the process for that. We've got to get through projections for FY24 and then get into seeing what the tax valuations are doing. So, no final decisions or anything, not a deep dive into budget specifics, but looking at the major things that may potentially be driving FY25 and budgets beyond that. So kind of running through the run of the show tonight, we're going to start with a municipal budget primer. We'll do a FY24 check-in, as I mentioned, and then FY25 budget outlook for the general fund. We kind of got that broken into a few different pieces. We're going to look at some of the property tax factors that will be in play for FY25. We're going to look at our FY25 staffing requests as it relates to our staffing in general, as it relates to the results of our compensation study. We're just now wrapping up how that's impacting retention and what the staffing pressures look like from our departments and their needs from a staffing standpoint. We'll look at some other considerations as well, and then also looking beyond 25. Because as we know, what we do now with capital projects and other long-term needs will impact us not just in FY25, but beyond that. And then we'll do the same basically for the enterprise fund, but mostly focused on the big driver there, which is that result in our rate model, and that's the capital projects, and then ongoing major programs and projects associated with that. So with that, I'm going to hand it off now to our Assistant City Manager, Victor Brownlees, to walk us through the municipal budgeting primer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll just spend a few moments refreshing ourselves in terms of municipal budgeting. So starting from the very beginning, we will be considering two types of budget as we work our way through this evening and subsequent months. One is the operating budget. What you'll hear is referred to sometimes as the general fund and others. And then the CIP budget, and just remembering that those two work closely together, and decisions that we take in respect of the capital improvement plan have implications in future years' budgets as well. Moving on then to think about the approaches that we take to budgeting. There are a range that are available to most government agencies. Like many municipalities, we use a hybrid approach. So we have a traditional line item approach to budgeting, and you'll see that when you get your budget book. It's hundreds of pages long, and that's to incorporate all of the many lines of detail that are included therein. However, when it comes to setting the overall budget, we take a priority-based approach. You have your strategic priorities, which you have established for the year, and that's what we will use to frame the budget. But overall, it is as I say, a hybrid approach to budgeting. Then thinking about the various funds, there are essentially three: governmental, proprietary, and fiduciary. Governmental, essentially, it covers everything that a general government would do, and we can talk a little bit more in a moment what the many features of that are. The proprietary funds are largely those that look like businesses, act like businesses, and we treat like businesses, either in terms of serving external customers or in supporting the organization itself. And then fiduciary funds are essentially trust accounts. So that's where we hold money on behalf of others for very specific purposes. So breaking down governmental, the obvious one is the general fund, and that's what we use to fund public safety, community development, parks and recreation, and those types of general governmental activities. The special revenue funds, things like hotel occupancy tax and the sales tax that accrues to the Economic Development Corporation, those are held in special revenue funds. The debt service fund is obviously that element of monies that we set aside to pay on debt that's invested in capital facilities. And then the capital project fund itself, that's essentially the CIP. Those are all regarded as governmental funds. As I mentioned, the proprietary funds fall into two categories: the outward-facing business activities of the city, so water and sewer is the obvious, and then our internal services. Those are the activities that occur within the organisation to support the remainder of the organisation. The motor pool and IT are the obvious ones there. And there may be more that we could add over time, but for now, those are our primary internal service funds. So just as a way to remind ourselves, there are restrictions in terms of what we can do with the money. The funds that we keep in the general fund can be used generally for anything that you see fit. The funds that are dedicated to the enterprises and the special revenues are more constrained. Yes, money can flow between them, but there are further restrictions. And we've talked, for instance, about the restrictions on the hotel occupancy tax. We've talked many times about what that can and can't be used for. Debt funds are restricted solely to the repayment of debt, albeit we make decisions during the year to repay early. We can't use that for any other purposes. And then the fiduciary funds, those are very, very specific to the things that we hold them for. For instance, medical insurance is one, police seizure funds is another. At this point, I'll hand over to Rachel to give us a walkthrough of where we are right now in the fiscal year 24 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to start our fiscal year 24 check-in with our revenue, starting with sales tax for the general fund. Our fiscal year 24 year-to-date sales tax collections are $26 million, which is 1% over fiscal year 23 year-to-date. We're seeing a 1% growth rate for fiscal year 25, and so the estimated annual sales tax for general fund will be $30.3 million. Currently, we are under the adopted budget of $31.5 million by about $600,000, and so we'll be amending that budget to $30.3 million at Budget Amendment 2. This is in line with professional forecasts for state sales tax for the remainder of fiscal year 24. Additional revenue received into the general fund includes property taxes and interest. Our general fund property taxes are in line with the budget and were anticipated to meet or exceed the budget. Our preliminary property tax values are being received from the counties through the end of the month. And our interest revenue so far is exceeding the FY24 budget, and we will be adjusting those accounts at Budget Amendment 2 to reflect the actual revenue. Other revenue sources in general fund with the potential to decrease include our licenses and permits. These accounts are being monitored and will be reviewed and adjusted at Budget Amendment 2 as needed. Revenue sources that we are seeing in line with budget and are not anticipating changes include franchise fees and fines and forfeitures. We do have revenue sources with potential increases, which include our charges for services account. These categories of revenue are across a variety of departments, so those adjustments will vary at Budget Amendment 2. Not in general fund, but part of our overall revenue includes our hot funds. The first quarter of FY24 hot funds was 5% above fiscal year 23, and so fiscal year 24 projected revenue is pending the second quarter payments. And we should be able to project that at Budget Amendment 2 as well. Our fiscal year 24 expenditures are currently in line with the budget and being evaluated through the budget meetings with departments for adjustments at Budget Amendment 2 as needed. Additionally, as part of fiscal year 24, we'll be reviewing our street maintenance and improvement plan as discussed. So Budget Amendment number 2 will include a street maintenance CIP project to be funded for $4.3 million over a 2-year period based on existing authorized debt and debt savings on other projects, $3 million of which will be authorized for fiscal year 24 and an additional $1.3 for fiscal year 25. In 2024, staff conducted a review of the municipal utility districts and the MUD rebates, which currently vary between 0 to 15 cents depending on the specific utility agreement. After an analysis of the rebates and the potential sunsetting of the MUDs, it resulted in a $4.1 million reimbursement to the city for FY23 rebates paid to MUDs 1, 26, 28, and 34. This eliminates $5.5 million in rebates that were budgeted for fiscal year 24 and beyond. The feasibility and timeliness of sunsetting MUDs is ongoing and will be brought to council at a future date if deemed reasonable. The MUD rebates received will be split between the Debt Service Fund and the Enterprise Fund based on their contributions. For the fiscal year 23 rebates, they'll be split 60-40 between General Fund and Enterprise Fund, and for the anticipated fiscal year 24 rebates, they'll be reduced by 50-50. The reduction in the MUD rebates will help us manage the tax rate and the water and sewer rates going into fiscal year 25. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Epperson for the fiscal year 25 outlook.
Thank you, Rachel. So starting with the 25 budget outlook, we're starting with the strategic priorities as we recently updated. And of course, foundationally, we look at our how, which is trusted government and resilient finances, the what we do, safe community, strong economy, sustainable infrastructure, and connected community. And this is all, we do these because of our why, and that is to be the community of choice. So we recently updated our strategic priorities and milestones after our February council retreat, and those were adopted by council in March. And these basically, we use those to review and shine a light on the departmental request as to things that support those strategic priorities. So moving forward, we're going to kind of hit the ongoing FY24 and the upcoming FY25 budget highlights associated with the strategic priorities and specific milestones. So not going to hit everything, but some of the ongoing stuff and stuff we'll see moving forward next year. So under trusted government, we have the Unified Development Code update, which will start this year, later this year, and will continue through 2025. And then under strong economy, a big focus there is the Pearland Economic Development Corporation. And so a big driver in supporting the strong economy strategic priority will be their 25 budget that'll continue the 20% towards infrastructure as well as all their recruitment and retention programs. Also, with the recent update and adoption of the Pearland Prosperity Plan, the implementation for that will continue on the remainder of this year and into the future, well beyond 25 as well. And then we expect the Old Town Revitalization Plan, which is funded in this year, that we'll have underway here shortly, will be completed in FY25, all supporting the strong economy. Under Safe Community, we've got our fire and police dispatching study, which is actually on this evening's council agenda for award, and that'll be ongoing into 25, as well as our ongoing heavy apparatus replacement program for the fire department. We've got 6 pieces of equipment on order, with the first anticipated to arrive by the end of this fiscal year, and then that piece of equipment will go into the motor pool with its lease fees. We expect 2 more additional pieces arriving in 25, and then additional equipment that's due for replacement will be considered as part of the FY25 budget. We have ongoing development and continuance of the Real-Time Crime Center, and then next year we will start the design process in FY25 for Fire Station 7, putting us targeting FY26 for the construction of that facility, and going operational with Fire Station 7 in 2027. With the lead time on heavy apparatus somewhere upwards of 42 plus months, we're looking to get the fire engine for that, I believe it's an aerial or a ladder platform, to be budgeted for in FY25, so it'll be here by the time the station's ready to open. And then in emergency management, we're looking at incident management team certification pay. We'll take a look at that as we go through our compensation plan for FY25. The purpose behind this is we ask a lot of people to take on additional training and exercises and things to be ready for emergency management. And so those that step forward and take on those additional education and achieve those things and are subject to that being stood up as part of an incident management team, looking at a certification pay for those folks. And then the implementation of the Pearland Recovery Committee is also a high priority in the Safe Community strategic priority. And then in resilient finances, medium-term financial planning is an ongoing process. We'll see if there's any needs for that from a budgetary standpoint in FY25. And then continued implementation of the 65th North Group recommendations is ongoing. Also under resilient finances is the internal service funds, and going to spend a little bit more time here because this past year we did make an update to our motor pool policy, extending out some of the life of the vehicles, which reduces our annual lease payments into the pool to replace those vehicles. We also updated really kind of completed the IT and the facilities policies because last year when we stood those internal service funds up for IT and facilities, we really just moved the operating cost over. We didn't start putting any money back towards any long-term replacement needs, whether that be servers and large software packages for IT, or for facilities like roof replacements or HVAC major replacements there. So we just moved the operating cost over, and so we're going to look at those things this next year. So for the motor pool, I think the thing to highlight here is we've got our first vehicles that actually have been in the motor pool for their life and have reached the point where they're ready to be replaced. So we'll have a handful of vehicles being replaced by that mechanism this year. And then some of the other FY25 priorities we're taking a look at is in the PD, we've fallen behind on having enough vehicles to meet our take-home vehicle policy. So trying to see what we can do to catch up there. A continued look at heavy fire apparatus, as mentioned on the last slide. And then beyond that, adding out as many aged out vehicles to the motor pool as the budget will allow, because we still have a significant portion of our fleet that is not in the motor pool and has some significant age and maintenance cost on those vehicles. So we'll continue to look at that. In the IT internal service fund, we're going to look to start implementing some of the capital lease fees to plan for some of those future replacements. And then we've set as the target there about $4.5 million for any, as our capital fund balance, to make sure we've got adequate funds in there to make any major hardware and software replacements as those are needed. So that's something, that's the target. It'll take some time to get there, but we're going to start working towards putting something towards that in FY25. And then similarly in facilities, we'll start to implement those capital lease fees and start trying to make progress to our target capital fund balance there of $3 million. So when we need to replace a roof or we've got major HVAC replacements, we've got a fund balance there to make those things happen without the fluctuations on the general fund operating side that it takes right now. So then sustainable infrastructure. We are, as we discussed earlier, we're looking to have an infusion into the streets program via some existing bond capacity, but we also want to look at it from an operating budget standpoint and try to get more money into our infrastructure reinvestment fund on an annual basis. So this is the fund we've fluctuated somewhere between about 1.1 and I think max of about 1.5 or 1.6. annually to go in to do our street rehabilitation, mostly our asphalt rehabilitation program, but we also need to start doing a lot more in our concrete street rehabilitation. And so, we've targeted, we'll see what we get to this year, is trying to add about $500,000 of that to that annually until we get to that amount that our pavement condition index study says we need to maintain our current condition index, which is approximately $6 million annually. And then also looking to improve our ability to maintain the streets internally and do some of the preventative maintenance things that we do not do today that extend the life of that infrastructure, is looking at the 5-person utility maintenance crew that was presented in the most recent CIP update series. And then lastly, but definitely not least, the connected community strategic priority. We're going to continue the development of our customer experience management, and that includes our customer service standards as well as the call center. So that's going to continue for the rest of this year and into FY25. And then, of course, the other major thing here was updating our field use policies with Parks and Rec and the associated fees with those. And that, again, we had the workshop a couple of weeks ago and have the updated fees on tonight's agenda. So if those are adopted, that will increase our revenues in FY25, trying to get towards that goal of cost recovery on those on the field use here. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Victor to walk us through the FY25 tax rate management and what we're looking to do there.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, obviously, when it comes to setting the budget, you will eventually set a tax rate. That is a strategic decision that you take. That's your responsibility. I think it's important just to remember that it's not something that's abdicated to anyone else to do. It's not set by the state. And in doing that, you have regard, obviously, to the strategic priorities that, again, you have decided for yourselves, the expectations that local people have of the services that they want to see delivered, and our need to meet certain statutory responsibilities. So that's very much the context for setting property tax rate. It's informed also by what happens in terms of appraised values and other issues relating to the economy. But it is, bottom line, a strategic decision that you take. It is not dictated to you by anyone else. Interestingly, one of the things that will impact us this year is the change to medical personal property. And we estimate that's about $275,000 of a hit to both the general fund and the debt fund. And that's about 2/3 of a cent. That's something outside of our control that will impact us. And as we follow that through the budget setting process, we'll be able to crystallize that a little bit more. But just to give you a heads up right now, we think that's probably about 2/3 of a cent. The other factor at play here, and you've talked about it before, I've sat through a discussion that you had recently, and that's about the homestead exemption and your appetite for increasing that. We just wanted again to say to you, that's your decision, but we would need a view from you sooner rather than later really in May, we would need to make changes if you're minded to do so. Now, there are pros with increasing the homestead exemption. Obviously, for residential property owners, there is an advantage there, albeit it's marginal unless you have an appetite for significant increases in the exemption. The downside is inevitably to those businesses, and there's only about 10% of our tax roll that is commercial. So the impact on businesses is substantially more than the marginal benefit to the residential property taxpayers. But again, that's your decision, but please let us know sooner rather than later. And then the last point I just want to flag up, and if you remember earlier when I talked about the different types of budget and the importance of the capital investment program and how that impacts the budget, not in just this year, but later years. So in June, we will be selling debt to fund investments in capital improvements that you had established for this year. That will impact next year's debt rate. And the decisions you take in setting the budget this time for the CIP and fiscal year 25 will impact the following year's debt rate. So it's just worth remembering that decisions that you take now have implications in the next year and beyond. At this point, I'll hand it back to Rachel to talk about other factors impacting the fiscal year 25 outlook.
Thank you. So in fiscal year 25, we'll be bringing forward a new compensation for implementation. Staff are the city's most valuable resource. Our compensation makes up 67% of the total operating budget, and the last compensation study was implemented for fiscal year 2022, and the city of Pearland has maintained a competitive place in the market since then. So again, in order to continue to provide excellent services to our citizens and to compensate our valuable resource of staff, a new compensation study has been completed and will be recommended for implementation in fiscal year 25. And this slide just shows the compensation changes that we've been making since fiscal year 2022 to stay competitive with the market. As a result, and a part of these compensation changes, the City of Pearland's retention is also quite high. So organizational practices outside of compensation have had a positive impact on turnover, and the turnover rate at the City of Pearland has decreased since 2022 and is indeed continuing to show a downward trend from fiscal year 23 through 24. So far, the city's turnover rate has decreased 0.7% compared to last year. Departments citywide strive to provide excellent customer service to our residents and to implement the strategic priorities and milestones of the council. This displays the departmental staffing pressures identified through budget submissions. All requests are evaluated through part of the budget process, and this does not represent what will be the final recommendation. At this time, we have additional fiscal year 25 considerations that are impacting the budget, such as ongoing inflation, our premiums for personal property insurance and premiums for healthcare, additionally part of our compensation package. Beyond 2025, we have additional factors that could impact our ongoing budget, such as Fire Station 7. Staffing will have a long-term impact on the O&M for the city. Parks projects O&M, including Hickory Slough Park and Independence Park Phase 2, our ongoing heavy apparatus replacements and implementation of lease fees, the implementation of the IT strategic plan, other staffing studies and pressures across the city, as well as legislative changes such as the interim changes recently published. With that, we'll turn it back over to Mr. Eberson.
So that concludes our piece on the general fund. So I think a couple of things there. Just are there any big things lingering for the council that they would like additional information on, that we can write up, that we need to be considering as part of the budget? And I think one of the big pieces out of this that we've talked about and wrestled with a couple other times, but if there is a desire to look at a homestead increase, then this is the time to give us that direction and input. And we'll go from there. Thank you.
Right, yeah, we have a deadline by the end of May, so they can have it at the appraisal district by the end of June, I believe is the deadline. So we would have to approve something in May to have it, there if we choose to do that. So with that, we'll open it up to questions from council. I'll open it up. Mr. Carbone, we'll kick it off.
Sure. Sure. If we can go back to slide 8. So I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it just so everybody knows. Under the enterprise, there's electric utilities and golf course. Just to clarify, do we run an electric utility or golf course?
We do not.
You didn't know that? No, you didn't know what we bought this slide?
Right.
I think,
Missed
just
one meeting. Sorry.
Sure. No. So yeah, you missed one meeting. No, just for the public, since this was kind of a primer on municipal budgeting, those were just put in there as examples. The only one we have is the water sewer.
No airport either?
No airport.
Slide 17. It says there's a 2-year CIP project. I guess why CIP, not like a reoccurring out of the general fund, or what? I guess what's the rationale from having a 2-year CIP split over 2 years versus maybe a standalone 1-year repetitive, or?
So in the general fund, of course, we talked about our infrastructure fund that funds most of our asphalt street program. So this, since this is actual general obligation bonds, thought it best fit in the CIP, and since we were going to spend that over a couple of years, put it in there in the budget, in budget amendment 2. This was when we discussed the needs for our street maintenance at the last CIP update series, and had identified these funds as potential to inject a lot of funds in there immediate. While we'd like to inject $4.3 million in there, in the general fund annually moving forward, I just don't think that's feasible. That's why we looked at this as a kind of a 2-year deal, and then even while we're doing this, trying to inject an additional $500,000 each year into the general fund that goes into the infrastructure fund until we reach that number, about $6 million a year that we need to keep our pavement condition index where it is today. This initial injection would, potentially get us a long ways to reaching where we need to be, and probably even, potentially next time we look at it, that number may come down a little bit with inflation, maybe not, but the overall program would be helped a lot by this because it all comes over a short period of time.
Slide 28. So this outlines target balance of 4.5 and 3 million, and this is outside the general fund. So when we get to our policy on reserve days, I believe we went from 60 to 90 in the recent past, and now these reserves are outside of that balance, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we targeted these amounts based on taking a look at what kind of would be our largest significant expenditure if we had to replace the entire ERP system or the entire police dispatch, computer-aided dispatch and records management system. That those are the kind of investments you'd have to make at that point. And similarly on facilities, if we had a significant or a major roof replacement or major building component replacement, we looked at, you could, if you targeted these fund balances and had that there, you could do those projects and then you build that back up for your next one.
I guess I would say once we get these balances up to somewhere near the target, maybe we need to go revisit that 90-day reserves, and if that potentially may be in excess, maybe that policy needs to be revisited, just so we're not sitting on excess capital. Only 2 more. Slide 37. So just to clarify, we do have a new comp study coming out for budget.
Yes, sir. So we've got the preliminary numbers there. We're still finalizing a few things in it. But I think what we wanted to demonstrate here is when we did the last study that we implemented over FY22 mostly, and a little bit catch up on 23, is that since then I think we've gone with a little bit more aggressive market adjustments than we had in the past. And so that was, knowing what's going on in the market with inflation and with labor rates and things like that to make sure we're staying competitive. And the results of that compensation study show that for the most part, we have stayed very competitive. We need to continue that to stay competitive. And then we do have a few areas that we have a few, issues that we need to make sure we make up. So we've got the preliminary results of that show that the last, basically since we did the last compensation study, we've stayed very competitive with the market. But we'll need to continue that to remain so.
And COLA adjustments, is that buried in the market adjustment?
Basically. So we've got the step progression, and then the market adjustment moves the steps.
Any reason why there's a total under PD and not in the other ones?
It was just in FY22 when we did the major adjustments in fire and exempt and non-exempt, that 10-year parity with the 2% minimum. It varied so vastly, it was hard to put just a number on that.
Okay. And I didn't mean to wear this shirt, but have you met with the PPOA yet?
We've sat down with them. We had a discussion on comparables or comparison cities and making sure our list and their list they match and they're the same list from last year or from 3 years ago, with maybe a few. We added a few cities to make sure we had some comparable fire departments similar to ours. There's not a whole lot of 24/7 paid large fire departments in our area to compare to. So looked at a couple others in the Austin area to make sure we had plenty to compare to. So we had that. Yeah, we've had that initial meeting. We'll sit down with them again, make sure we're all on the same page with what those comps are, and then sharing the information we use to make cost of living adjustments when you compare us versus communities in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex or the Austin area, because the housing costs there have a significant impact on the cost of living versus here, just to make sure we're comparing apples to apples.
Okay. And last, on slide 39, this is the request. So if I quickly add up fiscal year 25, I'm getting like 84 full FTE equivalent that's being requested.
So we hesitated in showing this.
Okay.
But I think, we always get asked as we go through the budget process, what's on the cutting room floor that you guys never saw? Well, now you see. So, I think it demonstrates that there are staffing pressures across the board. You see the biggest, portion of that is in the public safety arena. But, this does have to go through our budgeting process, and as we see each year, we have to prioritize and make sure we meet the highest needs we have, and so this will come down significantly based on available funds. But did want to kind of just share that initially because we usually get asked.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Good questions as always. Who's up next? Ms. Mona, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. So back to slide 28. What is our current fund balance for information technology and facilities?
Zero? There's a little bit in there on the operating side, right, Rachel?
So we're maintaining that 5% operating fund balance, and we have not been able to make any capital holding contributions for IT or facilities.
And it was created just 2 budgets ago?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then this is probably more for
Same thing with facility.
Lawrence. But in the PDC, I guess, local government code, section 505.154, there's funds available for water facilities. So I would like to look into that and maybe get back to us on how we might be able to utilize some of those funds for our water treatment facility plant. Thank you.
Any other, all the questions? Good deal. Who's up next? Chad?
On slide 17, the street maintenance improvement plan, have we had a look at hiring people versus contracting the work out? Because I think we would have to buy equipment plus hire the people. And then my second part of that question is going to be, it's a street maintenance CIP. Does that mean we're gonna take this money and designate certain roads to rebuild, or are we gonna fix some of the roads, kind of broadcast the money over the city to fix? In other words, are we gonna limit to just fixing a few roads, or are we gonna try and target fixing streets that are across the city?
So it'll be across the city, and it'll be in accordance with the pavement condition index, the highest needs, and that pavement condition index, you know, the program we have, once we plug in the amount of dollars available, it will modify based on the amount of dollars available what your target streets are and what your target type of, you know, whether you're doing rehab or just an overlay or crack sealing, those type of things, or a complete reconstruction. So we'll utilize the tools we have, so it's data driven, and addresses, you know, our most significant issues. But it'll be across the city. I think when we did that CIP update series, we did have several of the streets that would be targeted with additional funds in some of those maps. So we can bring that back to the forefront.
Okay, and then the first question is, are we going to get a bigger bang for our buck by hiring people and purchasing a bunch of equipment, or are we better off just contracting it out?
So, you know, I think ultimately we want to look at, you know, what is most cost effective, trying to stand up, you know, most of this is a lot of the asphalt work, and trying to stand up an asphalt crew that we'd have to get the equipment, we'd have to make sure we're adequately funded, or, you know, we have adequate crews trained and able to do that work. And I think just to inject funds right now, the best approach is going to go, you know, will be to increase our contracted services. You know, we also shared in that CIP update series a longer term plan to stand up a second maintenance crew for potholes and crack sealing and those type of things, and then standing up a concrete crew, and then eventually an asphalt crew. But, you know, we'll continue to evaluate what that looks like in the future. I know it's especially in our area. So, you know, one of the struggles, the county and their North Service Center that serves us, they're competing with a lot of the contractors in the Houston area versus their Southern Service Centers. I know it's very hard for them to keep people, to keep their crews full and be able to get the work done that they plan to get done each year. So that's another challenge with that.
Okay. Next on slide 39, the staffing pressures. I know this is just kind of a preliminary, but I think actually a breakdown of what positions would be helpful to kind of look at that and see, you know, actually, I mean, this is by department, right? So the actual positions I think would be helpful. And then next question, our increase in the compensation benefits, do we have a percentage of how much that's gone up over last year, the benefits package versus last year, percentage wise? And I know maybe just if you come back with it next time.
Sure. So are you asking like for wages or for the entire
No, not
package?
wages, but basically like our benefits package, like our medical insurance,
like
all
what that went up
yeah,
over the
how much
past
are we
year?
spending?
So when will we be bringing back the update or the renewal for medical, and at that point, we'll have the historical data as well. But when is that?
We will meet again with a hub the end of this month or the beginning of next. They will bring our preliminary 6 months into the year, and then we'll meet again with them in July to forecast and know what we're going to look at the next year. But we can definitely get you numbers as fiscal year 23 versus, or 22 versus 23, and where we're at today.
Okay, thank you. So the last thing is, it's not really a question, but more of a comment. I really like the motor pool fund. I think it's very responsible. It's planning ahead, and I like adding the facilities to that. So it's just a comment. That's all I have.
All right. Next up, questions, comments? Mr. Patel.
So I guess we found $10 million. Would that be fair to say with the mud corrections? On slide 19 or 18, I guess.
Yeah, so the $4.1 million reimbursement, that basically splits between the debt service fund and the water sewer fund debt service. And then the 5.5 and FY24, that'll fall to the fund balance.
So I guess technically our rate could have been lower last year. That'd be fair to say. I mean, a $10 million impact. Can you kind of elaborate, like, what exactly happened? I like the way you guys said you did an analysis.
Sure.
Is it a mist?
So our utility agreements with our multiple municipal utility districts are fairly complex, and they all I won't say they all vary from each other, but there's many varieties of them. Some of them don't provide a rebate. Some of them, many of them had 15-cent rebates when they started, and then we changed that to a 10-cent rebate a few years ago and then went to 0. There's some MUDs that they get the 15-cent rebate in perpetuity, and then there's other MUDs where there's different triggers that eliminates, either reduces and at a certain point eliminates the rebate. And some of them are based on their total tax rate of the MUD, and some of them are based on the debt service tax rate of the MUD. So it had probably been 2 or 3 years since we had looked at the municipal utility districts and those rebates. And so last year, as we were working through the budget, it was one of those things in the back of my mind that as soon as we get through this budget cycle, I need a full analysis of where we are on these MUDs, not just from the standpoint of the rebates, but also what does sunsetting these MUDs ultimately look like. And so when we ran the analysis, it had been, like I said, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 years since we'd run it, but none of these MUDs were even close to eliminating those rebates the previous time we'd looked at it. But with the valuation increases of the last couple of fiscal year cycles, the assessed value of the properties going up so much, like we've seen, that it actually dropped the rate of several of the MUDs below some of those triggers. And so the other complication in looking at those MUD rebates is we're budgeting for MUD rebates right now. So we're budgeting for what the MUD rebates will be in FY25. And we don't know what those MUDs are going to set their rate at until they set it either at the same time we're setting our rate, or some of them are on a different fiscal year, so they may be setting it by the end of the calendar year. And so it's almost, you have to project what it's going to be, and then you have to kind of take a look back at the same time. And so that's kind of where we arrived at. Well, one of the things, we're continuing to look at the feasibility and timeliness of sunsetting, and so we're going to probably be back talking about some specific MUDs very soon as well, and what that looks like.
So Trent, on the 4.1 million, how much has that been collected back? I'm assuming we had to go back. Have we gotten all of it?
All of it, 100% of it.
Okay, so there's no outstanding.
No outstanding.
Okay, and so I'm not sure with this. How many MUDs do we have in our community or in our city?
Joel?
So we've got 10 active in-city MUDs, and there's an ETJ MUD that is geographically located within the city's boundaries, but it's still in the extraterritorial jurisdiction. That's MUD 16, but there are 10 that are considered in city.
Out of 10, we had mistakes on 4 of them.
Yeah, 4 of them had hit the triggers to reduce the rebates.
Okay.
And we do have some other ETJ MUDs, but MUD 16 is an ETJ MUD we actually have a strategic partnership agreement with versus the others, which we don't. And what that does is have some triggers in there for potential annexation and eventually sunsetting the MUD.
Any other questions, comments? Adrian, any questions? All right, good deal. Back over here, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Victor, on slide 32, you made a comment about the medical costing about 2/3. I'm assuming that's the 657K that you're talking about right there. And that's through the election, I guess, last May that impacted that. Matt, are we making some adjustments in the Kirby corridor on the companies we're looking forward to enticing to move here as far as that goes?
I think we'd still welcome any life science or medical device company to come to our community. I mean, they'd still have good property, good values, just not their personal property that we're collecting. But
Right, but I mean, as far as an impact of what we're looking at, there wouldn't be assessed value that the city would be collecting there.
yeah, there would be less assessed value for those particular businesses.
Okay, I'm just curious, just, you know, my curiosity wanting to know what we're looking at there. Thank you.
I think it's worth the strategic, you know, what's our strategy and what's our strategic outlook on them. And I think it's worth, you know, having that discussion, especially when, you know, I thought it, you know, go attract and we'll see what we do once they get here, because the payroll and all the other stuff could still be very, very attractive to have in the community. I've got a couple just thoughts and comments. Slide 17 real quick.
Mayor, if I could comment real quick on that medical device. So I threw out a much bigger number there in February at our strategic priority. That was
750 or 800.
well, that was based on the and this, I think this is pertinent based on Mayor Pro Tem Koza's questions, is that half of that personal property is already exempted under Freeport, right, Matt? So half of that's already exempted, so we were only collecting on half of that, and then, of course, the new state law eliminated that half as well. So that's why the number wound up half of what I told you a couple months ago.
Right. I'm just looking at the additional impacts on the rest of the businesses
Sure.
we have here, because not all businesses are
Got the exemption, yeah.
Oh, well, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Afforded that
Right.
break.
Legislature picked a few winners there. So on this one, street maintenance and improvement plan, the way I see this, just my comment to staff, I'm glad to see, you know, obviously we're doing this and getting it done. We've been needing a big dose, if you will, just a shot in the arm to get our street maintenance and repair up, even though this still doesn't get us where we need to be. But I see this as that short-term, you know, just infusion of cash and get some immediate needs taken care of. And then, you know, the other one, you know, page 29, where, you know, we're setting some dollars aside, very similar to what we did with the drainage side. So, you know, at the end of the day, we are transitioning as a city from a very fast growth where, quote unquote, the spigot, if you will, for dollars coming into the community was free flowing, if you know, to put things together. And that's just not the case anymore. As we start running through property and those types of things, our growth rate is slowing, but we still have growth pressures of catch up. And we're going to be moving and transitioning to more of a maintenance-driven city than a growth city. And so I like the fact that we've done that with drainage, and here we are, at least with a goal. And I look at this as add 500,000 to the infrastructure reinvestment, you know, annually till we get to a certain amount. I think that's a goal. We look at that, we see where we go on an annual basis. But I'd like to see us, you know, continue to increase that to where we can, it's an investment back in our own infrastructure. And I think, you know, when people look at what should government be doing, this is something that people look at and say, this is something we should be, you know, strongly taken into consideration. So I'm glad that we're kind of getting serious about it. And then to Mr. Tooman's point, I think it's a both. I think ultimately we'll see a little bit of both. We'll have, we're going to stand up more crew, more maintenance, and then we're going to be doing a little bit of a hybrid of more maintenance on our standing up another crew, as well as, some contracting to get it out. Personally, if we can avoid all the equipment and all those kind of things, I think it's probably a good thing. But who knows? 10 years from now, we might be in a different situation where we need to hire that and just can do that all in-house. But I think for now, I think this is a good approach. Page 28, real quick. One before that. Yeah, same thing. I just wanted to highlight that both information technologies and facilities, these were new to the budget process a couple of budget cycles ago, and we just haven't gotten to where we can fund them yet. We are funding that, like was mentioning, the fund balance minimum, but not the capital, if you will. And so for anybody watching online or in the room today, this is, we get talked around about debt and things of that nature, here at the city. And, we've had to replace roofs before, but we've had to issue COs to do it. Well, this is moving away from that and getting to where we can do certain maintenance operations. Capital maintenance is the way I call it, like replacement of a roof or things of that nature, where we're doing it out of cash as opposed to issuing debt. Still doesn't, we could still ultimately one day, if we need it and we had to do some debt, we could. It's not saying we can't. It's just that this is the preferred method where we're pay as you go and we get those things done. Same thing with the motor pool. It's kind of an interesting. So we started the motor pool 6 years ago, Trent. 7, 6?
Yes, sir. 6 years ago.
Yeah. So we have the first vehicles that went into that we coming up for replacement. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all kind of flows. We talked a little bit about 20. Yeah, go to 29. I think I've already answered this. Already did. All right, sorry about that. And then page 37, both Chief Spires and Chief Taylor, I know that, and I was glad to hear, we're making sure that we're on the same page with the PPOA and our groups on what cities we compare ourselves for compensation and comp and class study and all of those kind of things. But Chief Spires, reality is, and I don't know all of the different cities, but who are our main cities in the Houston area that we compete against for talent? I mean, obviously there's hundreds of departments around the state, but there's several in the Houston area that we really go head to head with on our folks.
Yes, sir. When we're interviewing people, a lot of those people have applied. If they have applied somewhere else, we're looking at League City, Sugar Land, Baytown, Pasadena, and every now and then Houston, but not so much, not as much as the other four.
And how does our compensation stack up against that main competition? I mean, there could be an outlier somewhere, but those main cities, how do we stack up there?
So out of those 5, we are 5 out of 6 in the
So we're right there.
beginning salary.
We're right there. So obviously, if we have
So
somebody
we're
that-
5th out of 6.
So if we come, and what's the difference?
I have the chart. I don't have it right here in front of me, but
Okay.
I can get it to you.
So to just clarify that's on the beginning.
Yeah.
And so
Beginning.
that we've identified as something to take a closer look at.
Okay.
When you look at even officer, it's that beginning part, but if you look at the rest of it, the midpoint, the top out, and you look at the other ranks, we're very, very, it's
So as
very
you start
tight.
going up to a sergeant, to a lieutenant, and others, we get closer and closer to
Yeah, we're-
others in that market.
Above some, below others, we're right in the market. And even on police officer, when you get to midpoint and top out, it's just that starting on that we're scrutinizing or taking a closer look at.
Okay. And I guess Chief Taylor, kind of the same question. How do we compare starting versus, as we move up to our and who are our main? And it's hard. I think we're the second largest full-time paid fire services in the area.
It is different, as Mr. Epperson talked about earlier. We're surrounded by volunteer departments. That puts us in a different boat there. But if you're talking about fully professional departments, you're looking at your Baytown, Texas City, Galveston, Houston, Sugar Land, Missouri City in this area. And then if you branch out a little bit, you're looking at similar size San Marcos, Round Rock, Georgetown, departments like that, and move up into the DFW area. Of course, then as was also mentioned, you take a look at the living circumstances in both areas and kind of compute all that. And HR has currently a good list. We're happy with the list that's being used to look at, to evaluate that. So we're waiting for those numbers to come in so we can just get a really generalized look at it all the way across the board.
Okay, that's good. Obviously this is you take those two departments together and it's 60% of our people, somewhere in that ballpark. So it affects a lot of our employees. So making sure that we're competitive, and it's a competitive area, right? And so we want to make sure that I think we're all in that. But I'm glad to see the care and concern that we go about looking and comparing, those types of things. So that's all I've got. Chad, you got a follow up?
Yeah, I just got a question, kind of follow up on what you're saying. So Chief Spires, can you tell us, I know we were talking about money, but compared to population, the number of officers that we have service our city with the population we have, how do we fall in that ranking?
So we are currently about 1.35 per thousand. The FBI standards are anywhere between 1.8 and maybe 2.1 for the nation. Out of the 5 agencies I just gave you, I think we're still 5 out of 6 in that area. I think League City's the only one a little bit lower.
So just to simplify it, by the FBI standards, we don't have as many officers per capita of population compared to the other 5. You said we're 5 out of 6.
Yes, sir.
In Trent, you said there was some requests by the PPOA. Can you share those with us?
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what
Well,
they,
even
what
if
they
you
were
email
beyond.
them out later.
Yeah, we can share
just
that.
at least so that we can get a good look at it.
A part of it was looking at the actual pay grades and the starting pay for officer.
Right.
And then, there's a request for looking at the potential. So 2 or 3 years ago, we added a retirement benefit. If you've been with the city for 25 years and you're 60, that we would pick up your health insurance premiums for the next 5 years. And I think if you'd only been with the city for a lesser amount of time, then we'd pick up 50% of it. So there was an ask to look at possibly like a 55 at age 55 if you have 30 years, to consider that as something along those same lines. It's a little different, when we were looking at the one that's adopted now, we were looking at it from a standpoint of kind of a retention tool and a retirement benefit, to try to get, as the silver tsunami was occurring, to try to retain some of the folks with a lot of our long-term knowledge and experience. And so this is a little different in that it's more of kind of a instead of a retirement benefit, it's kind of a what do we deem it? Ron, help me out.
She referred to it as a termination benefit.
Yeah, termination benefit. So, the other piece of it is when somebody's leaving at that age, what are the chances they go to work somewhere else where those benefits are available, and then we no longer have to provide that as well. So it's something we've taken a look at. It's, there's some cost to it, obviously, but there's also from a standpoint of what's the, where is your employee base on the pay scale? If you're retiring folks that have been here for 30 years on the top end of the scale and you're replacing them with folks on the early end of the scale, then there's some cost savings there as well. So it's, there's some benefits from that standpoint as well, but we haven't really formulated a full recommendation on what the best way to go with that is, but that's the other main request they've brought to us.
Good deal. All right. move on to enterprise fund.
All right, I think we're going to hand it back over to Rachel to walk us through this.
All right. For the enterprise fund, we're going to be discussing what primarily drives the rates to start with, which is our CIP funding. We have our current debt obligation, our fiscal year 2025 CIP. We'll sell debt for that fiscal year 2025 CIP projects, and then we'll begin debt payments on that in fiscal year 26. So the debt payments are paid for by the user fees and the impact fees, and those are the major drivers of our current water and sewer rates. So our current debt obligations plus our pending fiscal year 24 CIP debt sale and the 2025 CIP will impact our water and sewer rates for fiscal year 26. So the opportunity to impact those rates are in the fall, in September, when we're reviewing that 2025 CIP, and even in June when we have that comprehensive CIP workshop. The projects that are currently driving the CIP and our ongoing programs include JHEC Water Reclamation Facility, Berry Rose and Longwood, our sanitary sewer rehabilitation program, lift station rehabilitation, and South Down Regional Lift Station and Force Main project. Some ongoing water projects include the Transite Pipe Waterline Replacement Program, our water production facility rehabilitation, and ground storage tank rehabilitation. And by fiscal year 25, the surface water plant will be completed and in operation. These are ongoing deferred maintenance programs that are necessary and contributing to our water rates going forward. So the Pearland Water has additional staffing pressures, and this is what they're proposed for their fiscal year 25 budget, and again is under review and consideration.
Thank you, Rachel. So just a couple of comments on the water sewer fund. So we mostly focused on the CIP here. That is the biggest driver in what we've seen in our water sewer rates in the most recent years. Of course, we do have our operating costs. Those are mostly in personnel, chemicals, electricity to run the plants, and the maintenance of those plants. So it's real hard to move the needle from a rate standpoint on the operating side of the water sewer fund. I think one way we're going to be able to move the needle long term is the approach of predictive maintenance and asset management, making sure we're repairing things as we go to elongate the life of our major plants and capital assets. So I think that's going to turn the tide long term. So we're not we're not seeing stuff fall apart as we're trying to replace it. But that's longer term. It's really right now the CIP and the surface water plant, the Berry Rose plant, and wrapping up the JHEC plant are those big drivers in the rates right now. And those are kind of locked in at this point as we're wrapping up surface water, wrapping up JHEC, and then just now getting into Berry Rose, which has to be done. And so we'll continue to look at and monitor the costs there, look at the other preventative programs for I&I and lift station rehab where we can. But it's gonna be hard to move the needle on that side of it until we get through the third of those large projects. So with that, hand it over to you, Mayor, for any questions.
Same thing. Open up for council questions. Obviously, the presentation is pretty short and sweet. I mean, we've got projects ongoing. It costs a lot of money to do that, and it's going to affect our rates. So, Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo what Ms. Mona said earlier regarding using the EDC funds to see if we can pay for some of these costs for the water projects. And I'll go even further and say, I know we have agreed to put 20% on infrastructure. I would say if we can look at that and even bump up that amount to 30 or 40. I think my goal this year would be to say, how do we sustain the rate? I don't know if you guys have received your property values. I'm sure most of you have. We have a property that went from $4.7 million to 12. How do you justify that? And so, I'm sitting next to my neighbor right here, Mr. Truman, and in his house, And so these are things that I think we need to be cognizant when we're doing the budgets. And I hear all the things that are needs for each department. And what I would like to ask, I know we're talking about the enterprise fund, and what I would say in the water and sewer, obviously the rates I just saw, if you can go back to the slide of the increases are double digits again. How do we bring that down? And one of the things I think if there is a way to explore using EDC funds, I'm very open to that idea.
All right. Other questions? Ms. Mona?
Well, this is more or less a general question, but when I see the staffing needs, I guess what I'd like to know in each department, where are we currently, like how many staff in each department, so that we can do a comparison if you have 20 staff and now you're increasing, you want to increase by 13. So I don't know if that's in more detail when we're doing the budget to identify what our current year is and then based upon projections.
Yeah, typically it will be. You'll see current full-time, but obviously staff can get you, that type of information as well. And then, where do we want to take it? And again, I think what Trent has said is every year there's tons of requests for people, and then it goes through the process, and instead of having this many, there ends up being this many that's added, and all those kind of things. So I'm glad they're putting this in here. We can look at it holistically and say, what, where, and how, can we get to what we need? And I think to that point, it's okay, why? So if it's a pressure, why is it a pressure? And what pressure does it relieve if we were to fund them, right? So good questions.
And I think, as we get into the actual budget, you'll see those numbers.
Yeah.
And then, we've got to take all this into account and make some decisions and recommend a budget and what positions are included in that and why and what the needs are and vet all those things. So, there's a lot more information behind all these that we haven't even been through yet because we're just now starting our budget meetings. So when we do bring it as an actual budget proposal, you'll have all that detail and the why.
Thank you, Mayor. A while back when we were first swapping out the meters, Trent, there was a discussion about the fact that the previous meters and mechanical readings were probably under recording the amount of water that was flowing through them, and that the new meters would more than likely result in higher, more accurate readings of usage, and therefore would result in additional revenue. Have we calculated what that additional revenue is, or how much has come in because of the new meters, and do we anticipate?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an expectation because we know when you have the mechanical meters that they slow down over time. Just exactly what that number is, it would be, I think, near impossible to try to calculate that other than using some industry standards based on the age of our meters. And of course, it's been about 4 years since we swapped those out. And so we've
That's what I'm asking.
realized,
Have we established kind of a baseline of what that increase was since we swapped them out yet? Or?
I mean, water usage is so subject to what's the weather this year and what, the growth as well. So we could look at historical water usage, year over year. That maybe be the best proxy for that.
I guess so. The question is leading into the next part. It was if we saw a more accurate reading, which resulted probably in a slight increase in the revenue collected, but with now the portal coming online and people being able to monitor their usage in a more, not necessarily real time, but close to real time environment, do we anticipate any reduction, like as people are able to, undertake cost saving measures? And do we have a plan for that, or is that something that we're just, like you said, it's so subjective, it's hard to even plan for?
Sure. So I think you'll have some people that use those tools and they're paying attention to how much water they're using. But I think just what people use water for. People are, we got so many with our newer housing inventory, your low flow faucets, toilets, and all that stuff, and then your older housing inventory as it gets renovated and stuff like that. Going to that, we've seen. The number we've seen over the years is our gallons per capita per day continue to fall. And I think that's probably a bigger driver in it than any kind of conservation rate mechanism or having more data to determine what you use on a day-to-day basis. So while it may have some slight impact, I don't know that it's significant enough.
Okay, no, okay. I was happy to see the article that came out. So Lori did a really good job of providing information to the community impact on how to protect our water system and stuff. So that's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions, comments? Oh, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Trent or Victor, I don't know which one, on the water treatment plant, what's our target date to having that up and running?
So I'm going to hand that off to David. And where's David? There he is. Okay.
No surprise it keeps getting pushed, and the most recent push was from TCEQ and delaying their site visit a week. But if everything goes according to schedule, as it sits now, we'll begin making water on May 8th, but not to the distribution system till mid to later part of June. But we should be at substantial completion and producing water by May, and that we have to do that to get the samples for TCEQ.
Okay, and as far as that goes, once we're up and running, currently we have an agreement with City of Houston for 1.3 gallons a day. Is that what it, somewhere right now?
Yeah, so we've got an agreement out on the west side at 521, and it's a take or pay 1.3, and we can go up to 6, and there's a surcharge for everything over the 1.3.
And so once we do get this plan up and going, or will we be relieving that, or will we continue that?
So David, you want to walk through what our strategy is at this point with that?
Sure, and really good question. I know it's been a point of some confusion, but the intent right now is to not release that because with any water purveyor, it's real troublesome and burdensome and a lot more expensive to get it back. Right now, we have it under contract, and at 1.3 million gallons per day is the take or pay. We're planning, as it is now, to use that 1.3, not exceed it, not use 1.35, keep it at 1.3, keep it at the take or pay minimum, and then use that, have the remaining balance to 6 MGD as our fail-safe or our safety net. Because everything is built around everything being 100% operational, including the Kirby well. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. I won't say it's a cheap insurance policy, but it is an insurance policy to ensure that our citizens have water when they turn on the tap. And the current strategy is to have it there and available, use only what we're paying for, whether we use it or not.
Right.
So
as far as, go ahead.
I was going to say, we're also taking a longer look ahead as to ultimate build out and what that looks like, and do we need that source or not. We have an update to our contract with GCWA, and when we bring that back to council, we're going to run through a lot of those details about what the future supply looks like, the future needs look like, and then what our overall strategy is to accommodate that in the near and the distant future, and part of that's looking at that plant as well. So we've got planned to update our water model in FY25, and that's going to help us answer a lot of those questions, because we're a very long east to west city. We've looked at potentially going to 2 different pressure planes. If we do that, we've got some needs on the east side, and so then we have to make some decisions on look at what are our options for filling those needs, and then what is the most cost-effective option as well. So,
okay, so just so that I understand it, we're using 1.3 before we start taking from what we're producing. Is that what I'm understanding?
So we'll continue to use the 1.3 because we're paying for that,
right?
And then basically we'll operate off of our plant with the Kirby well there as well. for peaking needs. But, when we looked at the split on the west side, that average daily need, what do you remember what that was, David, about? I mean, it's much more than the 1.3, but
Right.
yeah. So we'll use all that
And then move on. Yeah. That's what I'm just trying to understand.
No, real quick, to answer your question succinctly, the answer is no. We're going to use the new surface water plant as much as we can that it can be received. We can go to Kirby. We can go to 521 for the transmission of the water from the surface water plant. We will be running it as much as it can, as much as the distribution system can handle. The benefit is we're getting to rest Kirby. We're not going to run Kirby because it's a well. It needs to recover. We'll get that recovery time. We're going to use the surface water plant, and then just the minimum the minimum we have to take at 521 from the city of Houston, and the surface water plant should provide the vast majority of everything on the west end.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just curious. And then as far as water rates, what we pay versus from Houston to what it costs us to manufacture, we equal, lopsided one way or the other, just kind of curiosity of production costs.
It's kind of unfair because if we look at just our cost of our operation and not considering capital, our rates are way lower. We can make water from the surface water plant roughly $1 to $1.20 per 1,000 gallons. The water from the city of Houston, because the capital is built into it, we have no capital investment there, is more along the line of $4 to $5 per 1,000 gallons. So it's a good bit more expensive, no doubt.
Okay, I'm just trying to grasp what the metrics are there. So.
Right. If you factor in our cap costs, it's the same.
It's similar.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
That was a question I was going to ask. A good question. Beat me to it. Last call for questions, comments. All right. Seeing none. Oh,
Sorry, Mayor. Are we done with the presentation, or do we still?
real quick. Do y'all have a question on enterprise? Oh, Mayor Pro Tem. 1 second.
I got one comment that I forgot about. I just wanted to chime in with Member Chavarria and Member Patel about the EDC. If we look at in the water or in the enterprise fund for the water being able to help, I would be on board with that as well.
Good deal. Is that the end of the presentation? Okay. Patel.
So I appreciate that, Mayor. So I have a wish list, Mayor, also. As we're adding or requesting staff, I would certainly like to throw this idea. I kind of briefly mentioned to Trent what I would like to see is maybe council be able to have a chief of staff or someone council can go to request information or research. And what I'm looking for is basically a liaison between the council members and the city. I find at times requests are kind of delayed, and it's also council's fault, especially with mine, with the busy schedule. I'm unable to reach back out and find out what's going on. So this has been really a sticking point with me because a lot of times I want information. One, I'm dependent on council, city manager, and sometimes I know he's busy and he's got 7 council members and a city to run. And so I would ask this council to consider if there is a way. I was recently just told about 30 minutes ago or maybe an hour ago that it's a charter issue that we can't have a appointed staff specifically for the council. So I would like to see if there is an alternative, but I would like to get an idea and feedback on that.
So I think real quick on that, I think the question is whether they work directly for us and report directly to us. I think that's the issue with the charter. We can hire and have anyone that the council wants to put to work and how they report. I think the charter states that we only have 3 employees. So if it was somebody that's working directly for the council with no oversight from the city manager's office, then that would be the charter issue. So we could hire somebody and have that as a part of overall staff, but they would ultimately report the city manager's office and everything else. So that's the difference, I think.
Yeah, and I'm happy to look at that if council has an appetite to look at that issue. But I would certainly like to have somebody dedicated to city council. End of the day, that's my wish list. The other thing I'll tell you as you guys are going through the budget, I would ask, again, part of the cost, I guess, there is a lot of money out there that we need to kind of reevaluate on how we spend it. And I'll tell you the EDC is one because I've served on that. I think a lot of the EDC's budget has gone, the overhead costs have increased. And what I would ask that maybe we put a percentage of the revenues they intake on overhead in a lot of these departments. And so, if they have a $20 million budget and you say, hey, you have 10% to spend on just overhead, that's that's $2 million. If their revenues drop and it's 15 million, then it's 1.5 million on overhead. I think it gives a clear vision for their department heads to kind of say, look, I need to control my overhead. I think it's a good idea to kind of put this in to say we don't want overhead, but X percentage of what the department revenue is going to be. The other thing I would also ask, maybe the CVB needs to be revisited. One of the things I would like to see the CVB maybe fall under the Parks and Recs, because we constantly hear that we're sports tourism and that's what we are focused on. Maybe it needs to be part of the Parks and Rec. Maybe it will be a better, synergy there. And so I would certainly ask that. I think when you go through this budget, Trent, I would ask you to look at the overhead. I understand there are departments in need of additional staffing, and I'm open to the idea of giving it to them. I'm also open to the idea of pay raises. I'm okay with that. But what I'm not okay with is more consultants being hired. I'm not okay with, getting overhead in certain departments are very heavy and not on the others. So I think we need to be fair. When I saw that the first responders, and I understand first responders is a tough job, and believe me, I don't want it. But at the same time, the non-essential, non-exempt employees are as valuable to our community. And so I think you need to be fair when we do these pay raises. So again, I'm not against, increasing the tax value is obviously being increased, so the tax revenue will be increased, but I would certainly be very cautious about the tax rate. And I know that you should be getting, the values from the county soon, correct?
Yeah, we should be seeing those over the next few weeks.
Okay. And so I guess if you could explain to me what the next process is and how do we get more details on every single department and their request?
So maybe we'll jump to the last slide here. So we'll start seeing those valuation numbers later this month and into May. Those are the preliminary values. Those typically change fairly drastically by the time they go through all the protest and all the exemptions are applied and everything. So we don't really get the actual numbers till much later in the process. But as far as what's coming up budget-wise, in June, we'll have the first reading of Budget Amendment number 2, which adjusts this current year's budget to our projections through the end of the year. Sometimes we look at if we have any one-time revenues, do we have any one-time revenue expenditures we need to take care of, and then we'll make adjustments based on where we are through the year thus far with revenues and expenditures. And then at the following meeting on the 24th, we'll have the second reading for that. And then we'll also have the comprehensive CIP workshop. So that is really the budget workshop for the capital improvement program. So that'll look at what are the projects we're going to have in, where are we on the projects that are ongoing, and then what projects are we going to budget for and start in FY25. And then the projects that are ongoing, what are the cost of completing those projects as we move forward into FY25 and beyond. And then we'll get our actual value numbers very late in the game in July. And we'll have a few days there to plug those into the state mandated tax worksheet that'll drive the numbers that the state requires us to calculate for no new revenue and voter approval rate. And at that point, we'll understand what that translates into for revenues, and we'll have the bulk of the budget built, but then that'll allow us to inform, exactly what we're going to be able to do from a vehicle and and personnel standpoint, and all the other supplemental requests we have from the departments. So that'll inform the actual budget that we will deliver to City Council on August 7th. And then we'll, about a week later, we'll have our first budget discussion, and that we will walk you through all the details of the budget, answer any questions, and take any questions from that, answer those over the next week, come back with budget discussion number 2, go through that piece of the process if necessary, come back with budget discussion number 3, and end of August, and then we'll move into September, where we have our public hearing. We'll have the first reading of the budget, tax rate, and any changes to our fees, and then second reading on September 23rd. So that's kind of the process going forward. So when you get your budget on August 7th, that's when all the the details of the proposed budget will be there, and we'll walk through those at that first budget discussion.
Okay.
So if there's any information or questions between now and then, let us know, and we'll answer those with available information.
Yeah, and I think there'll be some, hopefully some supplemental information just off some of the questions today, in the interim. If we can get some of that out, that'll help.
Yeah, we'll do an after action. I think it's tomorrow. We got scheduled to go through any of the questions today that we need to, provide some information on, and go from there.
Okay. Last call for questions. Ms. Chavarin.
Yes, I would be in favor in looking into Councilmember Rushi's request, but I guess my question that I have is charter. Does that have to go to the public, or how does that work if we have to?
Go to the public.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You'd be creating a charter position, is what it is. So we have city manager, city attorney, municipal judge. Those are direct reports. Everybody else, according to the charter, reports directly to the city manager. So if we want somebody that works for the council, helps the council, helps keep the council organized, or whatever the case may be, I'm still trying to figure out what information people are not getting. But with that, it could still be somebody that works under the city manager's lead. That doesn't have to go to the voters. That would just be a function of the budget. Right. It just has a budget impact. But other than that, it would have to go to the voters to be approved. If it's directly working for the council, oversight from the council, no oversight from the city manager's office, I have a personal thoughts on it. I question whether that arrangement is really necessary. So really the question to me is what's not happening, what's not getting to you or any other member of the council, when you get a request. At the same time, I wouldn't expect the city manager sitting there waiting for all of our requests to come in and jumping on. I mean, he's lots of stuff going on. So, yeah, and so those requests do.
I think in that scenario, that that if there were such a position, they're going to the same people that we're already delegating that stuff to anyway. So to me, it's really, do we have the capacity to handle what those inquiries are and those things now within our current staff? And we have added to that staff last year. And if not, or what are we missing there that's not fulfilling those needs? So it's, I just, having somebody, work back through the same people that they'd have to work through with us, I think that creates some issues and friction. So, I think the first thing I want to understand is what the need is, and then how do we make sure we fulfill that need.
Hey Trent, on the future meetings, it says on August 7th, proposed budget delivered to council. And then August 12th, which is 5 days later, is budget discussion.
Yes.
Is there a way that we can get a little more time that includes a weekend and 5 days to review the whole budget plus our regular council stuff? And
This is about normal.
Yeah, so maybe Rachel, can you kind of walk us through when we'll see the actual values from the
Well, I think
counties?
real before she does, sure. I hear that it doesn't have to be normal. The problem is getting the values from the appraisal districts. It's not staff. It's getting the actual values from the appraisal district in a timely fashion. Every city and out here battles the same exact issue with timeliness, and we have 3 appraisal districts that we're getting it from.
And Harris County is only going to give you an estimate.
Right.
Right.
Well, I wanted to set that, Rachel, sorry.
So we're scheduled to get our appraised values on July 29th, which is a Monday. We usually get certified values from 2 out of the 3 counties, but that was not true last year. We only got certified values from 1. So actually getting the numbers on that day, we'll see. And then it takes some time for us to put those numbers into the tax calculation worksheet. Without that weekend for staff to work, we just didn't think that we wanted to make sure it was accurate and have more time to plug that in and then to plug in and discuss with the departments the final numbers. So normally we would have tried to get it to you that first Friday, but it's really just not feasible with the way tax numbers have been coming in recently. So we'll get that to you as soon as possible on the 7th.
So yeah, so usually we get those and we've got a weekend to work and finalize everything and get it put together. And the way the calendar fell this year, it doesn't allow that. So, you know, if we can get it any sooner out the door, we will. But it's just, having a week to crunch all those numbers and finalize all the budget documents it just didn't leave us much
people are
time.
receiving preliminary, they're receiving their values from the different CADs, as we speak. I got mine sometime earlier this last week. And so we have some idea of where the appraisal districts are going because we get something kind of on a monthly basis, but until you have people who protest and all the other stuff that goes through that process, we really don't know it. And even then, like Mayor Pro Tem said, what we ultimately get from Harris County, even at that point, is still an estimate. It's a certified estimate. It's not even a certified roll. It's a certified estimate. And so, you're moving on beyond that. So that's been one of our issues in the past is it just doesn't leave us time to do much. So they build as much of this process as they can, waiting on it, and then start applying those numbers.
And what we do in that first budget workshop is we do spend a significant amount of time going through a lot of the details on everything. So, it's you've seen our budget. It's very thick. There's a lot in there. So we try to break it down into the components as best we can and really focus on, from an operational standpoint, how we're controlling our operational cost, and then really focusing in on the supplemental request and the things that support our strategic priorities that are either new to the budget or enhancements in the budget. So we try to get it down to those specific things so you can see what's changed year over year, and then kind of what the important things are that are meeting the council's strategic priorities.
So you're saying getting it on the 5th is okay?
Well, Rachel welcomes all and everybody to come compile the budget books.
Yeah.
Those last couple of days before we have them shipped out.
All right, last call for questions. Seeing none, we will adjourn this special meeting agenda at 5:39. All right, we will be back in. I think we have 3 proclamations ahead of the council meeting, so we'll do those starting right around 6:10.